Welcome to the Filmcast review of Gladiator 2. I'm going to read the plot summary of this movie from the internet. Years after witnessing the death of Maximus, Lucius must enter the Colosseum after the powerful emperors of Rome conquer his home. We recently just reviewed Gladiator 1 here on the Filmcast. We remain big fans. For Jeff Kanata, he's become a big fan of Gladiator. It's wonderful. Gladiator, the original Ridley Scott 2000 film starring Russell Crowe. Still a great movie. Which, by the way, is an opinion I think this movie really shares. But all that said, let's get to our thoughts on this new film, Gladiator 2. Devindra Hardwar, let's start with you. What did you think of the sequel to Ridley Scott's classic?
Guys, have I got a great concept for a movie? Imagine a soldier, a general, a renowned general, became a slave and fought his way up to become loved by the people. Also, at the same time, this movie is set in the decline of the Roman Empire, right? The emperor, the people in charge, not good dudes. All they care about is greed and vanity and, showing off the Colosseum to distract the public. It turns out this gladiator could be a really good vessel for overthrowing those emperors, maybe saving the Republic and maybe saving democracy. I won't say what happens, guys. That would be a spoiler. But, this is the same damn movie. We've talked about this before. This is the exact same movie as Gladiator 1. And it is also, it loves Gladiator 1. It's beholden to it. It loves Maximus. But I'm shocked by how they just didn't change anything. And instead of Maximus, like we talk about Russell Crowe being movie star, you can't just replace Maximus. You got to have two people to take the role of what Maximus was. That's Paul Mescal as Lucius, Paul Mescal, and Pedro Pascal as General Cassius. Two dudes to make up for one Maximus. How is this movie 2.5 hours long?
It's because of Maximus inflation that's occurred over time.
That's true. Right? It's true. Maximus inflation.
We're at maxflation right now. And that's why you need
2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
2.5 hours long, guys, doing the same thing, doing the exact same thing as the first movie. And I'm a little shocked. Like, it's not a terrible movie, but I'm shocked by how they just did it again. It might as well be called Gladiator again. Gladiator 2 TOO. Yeah.
There have been, to be fair, there was a time in our lives when we'd get sequels to movies, and the sequel would just be a kind of remake of the first film, right? Sure. Like, I'll just say like The Hangover Part 2 or
Ghostbusters 2.
Ghostbusters 2, to some degree, like Jurassic Park, Lost World, like,
sure.
These are just like, hey, we're just going to, people like the first one. Well, how are we going to deliver something interesting? Let's just do the first thing all over again.
Lost World, not a great movie, but at least changes some things up. It gives
true.
Me new settings and stuff. And this is like what happened in the first movie. Let's have that happen in the second. Like, I am a little shocked. We complained about The Force Awakens being this, and I reject that a little bit for The Force Awakens because on a plot level, sure, kind of copies the first movie, but also new characters, new experiences, new vibes. This movie, all the same vibe. In fact, worse because there's no new Hans Zimmer stuff. It's poor Harry Gregson Williams who has to, just deal with Hans Zimmer's leftovers, I guess.
What was very odd to me was how I think Harry Gregson Williams is a very talented composer.
Love it.
What was very odd was how unmemorable this score is. Like Gladiator 1 had literally one of the greatest scores of all time.
Yeah.
This one could not pick it out of a lineup. Like they used some themes from the original, so it's not like they were forbidden from doing that. It's very strange to me how unmemorable this score is.
And they use some things, never the like rip-roaring actual battle theme. Just, they can't touch it. They don't even try to replicate it, I guess.
Jeff Kanata, really curious what you thought about Gladiator 2.
You spend hours working on your limerick, and then somebody just says it.
Somebody just tweets it out.
Offhandedly, and just whatever. Here we go. Ready? Here's the limerick.
Sorry, Jeff. I should have gone to you first.
No, it's okay. Much more than 2 decades ago, I hated it with Russell Crowe. But I don't think my mind will be changing this time with Gladiator TOO. Which would have landed a lot better if Devindra hadn't said that exact thing.
Sorry, Jeff.
I agree. Honestly, it's really good that we rewatched Gladiator 1 because I would have come to this and gone, this is why I hate Gladiator movies, guys.
Yeah.
This movie is very bad. I disagree with Devindra when he said this isn't a bad movie. It is a bad movie. And you guys said, oh, it takes 2 actors to replace Russell Crowe. Evidently, it also takes 2 actors to replace Joaquin Phoenix.
Actually, 3, technically.
It's literally, they just went, how do we do more Gladiator? Let's just double everything. What if we double everything? Also, this movie, we'll talk about it more in spoilers, but literally jumps the shark. Literally jumps the shark. There's a moment in this movie where I was like, you have got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. This movie's bad. And honestly, you know, I don't like to come down on individual actors or anything like that. I think Paul Mescal is perfectly fine in some of the other films I've seen him in. He's no Russell Crowe.
He has nothing here. Nothing in this movie. Yeah.
You really are reminded as to what I just got done last week saying I don't think Russell Crowe deserved Best Actor for his performance in the first Gladiator. And I stand by that. But you also, it's hard to not recognize what he brought to the part in the first movie, because it really rides his charisma, his movie, you know. And Dave, you repeated that your refrain about there being no movie stars anymore. Certainly Paul Mescal is not doing anything to change that notion in this movie. I
agree. He is very competent, but it's just like, you can tell the difference between a Russell Crowe and a Paul Mescal, right? Like I feel bad saying it because he's not bad. It's just like, it's not the same. It's not the same.
I will say, though, the movie does not give him what the first movie allowed Russell Crowe to do, which is nuances of a character, different shades of a character. Instead, this movie splits up those like personas into different characters. So you have a lot less to work with.
I agree with that. And yet,
you
also can see that Denzel Washington is a movie star.
In
this movie.
Yes.
But also, like, what's he doing in this movie? Like, just Denzel, this movie's beneath you. Ridley Scott, I don't know if this movie is beneath you anymore, but it certainly feels that way. It's so by the numbers and lame. Even the fight scenes, which were thrilling in the first Gladiator, I think feel so rote and by the numbers. There's nothing. The villains are, we had Joaquin Phoenix in the first movie. You kind of understand where he's coming from. It feels grounded and it feels motivated by, his father and his life. And you kind of, as mustache twirly as he can be in it, you also kind of feel for him in a certain sense. The characters in this movie are ridiculously two-dimensional. Just utterly, other than Denzel, who gets actually some motivational juice by the end, you kind of understand where he's coming from. But our 2 emperors, by the way, no explanation as to why we have them. And
somehow the emperor's returned, Jeff. Somehow.
Yes, somehow the emperor has returned. This time too.
Look, I'm just going to say, in order for there to be like really tyrannical emperors in this movie, which takes place significantly after the events of Gladiator 1, by definition, nothing that happened in Gladiator 1 was of any consequence, basically, right?
Yeah.
But
it's not even, it's 15 years?
Yes.
15 years? Yeah. Like, listen, that's not that long ago,
nothing that Maximus did in Gladiator 1 made an impact. Basically.
Nothing. So let's proceed with the same plan.
The Obama administration had no impact. It's like, well,
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I guess you can make that argument.
Where are we now? Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So, I don't know.
Right. It's like,
shit. You're right.
Pendulum swing. I'll buy that.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
Yeah. I think the biggest, my biggest problem with this movie is it insults my intelligence and it's dreadfully boring. And I think that because it's just rehashing the same things and not doing anything particularly fun. It thinks that what we want is turning Gladiator to 11, It's like, oh yeah, this time inside the Gladiator thing, they'll do this. And we talked about this last week.
Yes.
When we talked about Gladiator 1, where it's like, hey man, when you have an actual tiger, there's like a challenge in how you're going to shoot that.
Right.
To like make the tiger seem ferocious and terrifying and realistic. When you have CG monkeys that can do whatever you want.
No, it's fun.
Honestly, we lose something. And I think that this is like these two movies next to each other are really kind of a case study in when you can do whatever you want, sometimes it's less impressive and less impactful. And so I really think this movie makes the first Gladiator less good, in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Well, so let me actually defend part of this movie and say I actually thought the action scenes in this movie were great.
I agree.
I know like the CG
except for the CG.
The CG is not great, but what I appreciate is it really feels like they were like, we can't just we can redo everything else from the first movie, but we can't redo the action scenes. We have to do something new and have some kind of new spin. And literally the locations of the action scenes are the same from the first movie, right? But they're like, we're going to try to do something different for each one of these. And I think they accomplished that. And
it is different.
It is different, right? And so each one of the action scenes of this movie are like, there's some kind of interesting spin on it that wasn't in the first film.
I'll also say the hand-to-hand action looks better because it's framed better and it feels like it's choreographed better. Whereas in the first one, there's a lot of choppy editing. There's a lot of like big close-ups where you can't tell what's happening.
Yeah, I agree. I think the hand-to-hand is better in this movie. So if you're watching this just for the spectacle, which by the way is something the first film condemns, then I think you'll enjoy this movie just for the action scenes. It is very long. I also think Denzel Washington is really good in this movie. Like he is by far the best thing this movie has going for it in terms of casting. And it's just delight to watch Denzel Washington strutting around in his little, togas and shawls and all that stuff. Like I love that. So anyway, those are some things I really liked about Gladiator 2. Having said all that, everything else was bad. And specifically, this movie is so enamored of the first film. It's really embarrassing. It's like, hey, like all this stuff from the first film, we love it so much. And by the way, here's some more stuff we're going to add to the lore, all of which is bad, all of which is terrible. And I'll get into it momentarily in spoilers. But it's pining after this other film in such an intense way that it can never become its own thing. It's imitating the first film. It's like in dialogue with the plot points of the first film, but it never really becomes its own thing, and that is a shame. I will say that I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but there was a original Gladiator 2 that Nick Cave wrote. You know about this movie?
I have not heard about this. I do like the movies he's written,
So in 2013, on Mark Maron's WTF podcast, Nick Cave described so Nick Cave actually wrote this script, and I'm reading now from relevantmagazine.com. Maximus goes to purgatory and is sent down by the gods who are dying in heaven because there's this one god, there's this Christ character down on earth who is gaining popularity. And so the many gods are dying and they send Gladiator back to kill Christ and all of his followers. The movie was originally going to be called Gladiator Christ Killer. Right?
Oh man,
that
would have been something.
My God,
that would have been something.
Yeah. And so the main guy was Maximus's son. He has to kill his son and was tricked. So he has to kill his son. Like Maximus goes back to Earth and needs to kill his son, and then becomes this eternal warrior. And it ends with this 20-minute war scene, which follows all the wars in history right up to Vietnam and all that sort of stuff. And it was wild.
I love Nick Cave.
And he said
he does shit like this.
It was a stone cold masterpiece. Now, I was listening to Tansy Gardam's Going Rogue podcast, which kind of chronicles the history of this, and she very rightly pointed out that actually makes no goddamn sense because the original Gladiator took place hundreds of years after Christ, and so it doesn't make sense that then Russell Crowe would then need to be dead and go back to.
What if he goes back in time though? What if?
Anyway,
he's both coming back from the dead and going back in time.
I
Bill
bring
and Ted
it up
situation.
I bring it up just because that there are other ways they could have gone with this story that would have been not necessarily better, but definitely more interesting. And it's a shame that we got something that feels so played out, such a rehash and uninteresting.
It's like this Legacy sequel itis that
Mhm.
is happening in Hollywood right now.
Absolutely. All right, lots more to discuss. Let's talk about spoilers for Gladiator 2 starting right now. All right, so one of the big spoilers from the movie is that Lucius is actually Maximus's son.
Okay.
And this actually makes Gladiator 1 worse, because if you go back and watch Gladiator 1,
all he has is his honor.
Well, all he has is his honor, and then they like Connie Nielsen and Maximus have like one conversation at the beginning about their lives, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I have a son. He's about 8," and she's like, "I have a son. He's also about 8." So that means,
he cheated on his wife.
They definitely cheated.
Could have been right before. Come on, come on.
You know what I'm saying? Like it had to have happened around that time.
Yes.
At the same time as they were both theoretically married. So it's like, that sucks. That, you know,
I don't know about that more. Like, yes, the timeline is kind of weird, but it could have happened before. Like, come on.
So
this
dumb.
is not the thing. There are many other problems to point to here.
Yes, but this is also dumb and cloying.
Yeah,
it's like
it's
we
bad.
can't have another character be important unless they're
related
to Russell Crowe.
Right.
Like, so
I do think the first movie kind of hinted at it, is the thing. And I remember the conversations around it was just like, hey, maybe they had something. Yeah.
I like the fact that in the first movie, his son is slaughtered, and so he feels a kinship to someone who is not his blood,
right?
And he wants this kid to be okay,
right?
But he doesn't have any actual paternal relationship with him,
correct?
Because he lost his actual family that he loves. That was the only thing in his life that mattered.
It makes the first movie worse, right? Like, it's just like, oh wow, that's less interesting now. That said, you know, Jeff, maybe he didn't know Lucius was his son.
Maybe he didn't. So there's a lot of ways this could go.
True. Still doesn't matter.
The conversation around the first,
in my headcanon, he never knew Lucius wasn't his son. So
it's very easy for. It's not like they had email. Couldn't call and just say, hey, I had an illegitimate son with you, Maximus. That's really going to go over well with my family. I remember around the first movie, people did say like that was like a thing that the movie could have hinted at before.
Right. I mean, okay. Another thing about that plot that kind of sucks is there is this this movie replays multiple things from the first film. Like the opening credits is an animated recap of the first film. There's like flashbacks to the first film. I think it ends with a shot from the first film.
Ends with the same song. Yeah.
It feels like Ridley Scott hired the same person that did his Scott-free logo to do that.
It looks the same.
Looks pretty cool. Wouldn't surprise me if Ridley Scott himself did this. Like Ridley Scott, by the way, a very skilled like artist. So I don't know if he did it, but anyway,
he's got movies to direct. He ain't got time for that.
Yeah. But one of the things, well, maybe he did the Scott-free logo, but the you're right about the Gladiator stuff. The Gladiator animated. Anyway, so at the end of Gladiator 1, Maximus dies. He collapses, and then we went back and we watched it recently, and he's like, now Lucius is safe. I did all this shit I did. Lucius is safe. He can grow up in a democratic republic.
Fix the Roman Empire for me, please.
It's gonna be great.
My dying
wish. Be great. Right. Yeah. That's my dying wish. And then Connie Nielsen says, was Rome worth a good man's life? Honor him. And then literally what this movie says is right after she gave that speech, she's like,
fuck all that.
Get the Lucius the F out of here.
She's like, fuck all that. No, there's no way these guys are going to honor this good man's life.
Which is a very cynical way of looking at the ending of the first film. It's basically like, oh yeah, like essentially you were comparing what Maximus did to like the Obama administration, Jeff, but what this movie presumes is maybe it had zero impact whatsoever because even Lucilla wasn't buying what Maximus was selling at the end, right?
Yeah. No, she's like, she's like, it's all well and good that we make them, but I'm not gonna like my son. This shit's gonna go bad. I can tell.
So again, it just like in order to remake Gladiator, this movie has to undo Gladiator, and that is sad. That is sad that it has to.
It's almost like The Force Awakens.
Yes. Why is there another Death Star?
Exactly. We have to undo any good that happened in order to get back to the status quo because we don't have the courage to actually do something new or interesting. It's like we got to just give you the same shit again. So that means we got to just reset everything. It's so exhausting. It's like, what are we even doing, man?
I thought that the relationship between Lucius and his mom Lucilla was like not particularly well developed in this movie. At first he's like, I hate you, and then literally like 2 scenes later he's like, I love you. There's just not enough time. Honestly, this movie feels a lot like Napoleon, which is another movie that Ridley Scott made with David Scarpa, where it feels like there's just whole sequences of things that are cut out of this one.
Just yada yada yada. So much stuff in this movie.
There's likely a director's cut coming.
I think there will probably be a director's cut for this, and I think it probably
there was like a love interest that was completely cut out of it. Like there's a whole thing.
There's a whole character. I think there's gonna be stuff that comes. There's so many bizarre editing choices in this movie. Like I'll just throw out a couple examples. Paul Mescal's fighting the baboons or whatever, the superpowered monkeys or whatever, and then he kills one of them, and then like literally the fight's over. Like they don't show how he kills all the other ones or how everyone else lives. The fight's over. A lot of scenes that feel like abridged or that feel like, oh, we're just cutting this off like right here.
But can I
arbitrarily?
Can I ask you?
I feel like we'll be made better in a director's cut that will be resolved.
I want to ask you guys a question about this legitimately, without any cynicism. Or without, obviously, I think Ridley Scott is among the world's great filmmakers. Not so much recently, but I think it's indisputable that his oeuvre is among the greats, right? But at a certain point, if you deliver a 2.5-hour movie and it just doesn't hold together unless you give me a different cut of an even longer movie, like this keeps happening to him over and over and over. Like at a certain point, isn't it just his fault? Isn't it just bad craftsmanship?
I'm saying that. Like I didn't watch the Napoleon director's cut, but I did not hear that was a transformational director's cut either. I still dislike that movie.
It seems to be a problem that recurs with this filmmaker, that he can't make a coherent, excellent version of his movie unless he goes back and adds in a bunch of shit that he cut out.
I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who just think he is straight up a bad director. And that is because his early stuff, there's a lot of great early stuff, 80s and 90s, but then there's a big fall off and it just keeps falling
right after Gladiator, really.
Right after I mean,
you
Black
get
Hawk Down.
Black Hawk Down's right after that's excellent.
Kingdom of Heaven,
American Gangster.
American Gangster, I did not really dig, but he was at least trying different things, and it just felt like now, at least after the 2000s,
I love The Martian.
Yes, yeah.
I would say that Ridley Scott is extremely good at some things, and there are very few directors on this planet that are able to direct scenes of the scale and size and ambition of a lot of the scenes in movies like Gladiator well, and do it in a way that's comprehensible and exciting. And I think he continues to show that he can do that in this movie. I think he is much less interested in things like character development. Like it's like, as long as the action scenes are good, like the character development, whatever, like we can kind of gloss over that. It's not that important. That's my sense, having watched Napoleon and Gladiator 2.
You described him as an artist, and he is a big aesthetics guy. Like Blade Runner never fully clicked with me until I was like, I am vibing with the mood and the tone and everything set up here, even if what's happening on screen is pretty simplistic and not like the characters themselves aren't as interesting as I want them to be. So yeah.
One of the big spoilers in the movie, right, is that Lucius is Maximus's son, and I think that it's what's odd is it's not clear what Lucius knows at what time. Like, does Lucius know he's Maximus? Like, Lucius knows he's Lucilla's son. Does he know he's Maximus' son, but he needs to pretend that he's not Maximus' son? I thought that was a little bit confusing the way that was.
By the end of the movie, he absolutely knows he's Maximus.
Oh, absolutely. I'm saying at the beginning of the film, like, what is clear to him and what is not. And like, but I was very disappointed by that whole Lucius and Lucilla relationship. Like, what is his real journey in the movie? Like, he's angry at being abandoned, but like, if we take the movie at its word, Lucilla was acting pretty reasonably, like in trying to make sure he's safe, and there just never is any, like.
Well, what about we build up this whole antagonism between him and Pedro Pascal? Pedro Pascal kills his beloved,
orders his wife to be killed.
And then the turn where he kneels down with him feels so abrupt and out of nowhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And unearned, like, by the way, those archers, very good at shooting Pedro Pascal and avoiding.
I did wonder, the first Gladiator did post the question, what if Commodus gave the thumbs down and then the person refuses to kill him? Like, do they have no recourse? And the answer is they have archers shoot like a gajillion arrows into the person, but
somehow managed to miss who they're very, very good archers.
Well, they bonded over their Maximus fandom, guys. Like, that's really it. Like, oh, you like Maximus too? Oh, okay. You must be a cool dude. I do want to say this movie pretty much shafted Lucilla. Like, I think Connie Nielsen just did not have much
with
to
an
do.
arrow shaft.
With the arrow, but also like she just existed to be like, oh yeah, I was a plot point from the first movie. I am, doing the same potential overthrow of the government plot here, and then I die, and that's it.
There's this really bizarre scene where Lucilla shows like a bust of Paul Mescal's father as a young person, and it's supposed to look like Paul Mescal, I think, right? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I think it was the grandfather.
Big curly bearded dude.
I think it was the grandfather. I think it was Marcus Aurelius.
I think it was supposed to be what's his name?
Dumbledore.
But I thought it was. My impression was we were supposed to take away from that scene. Oh, he kind of looks like Paul Mescal. Like that's what I thought we were supposed to.
Again, that's why I think it makes more sense as being the grandfather who is a key character. Her husband, whatever, man. He died. Yeah. That's how important he is.
But basically, what I'm saying is, it should look like Russell Crowe. That's the point I'm making. Is like
it should look like Russell Crowe, except she's like, you look like your grandfather when he was younger.
Right.
Yes.
Also, those busts at that time just looked like a guy. It was
really girly,
very generic.
It wasn't like photo real.
Okay. I also have to say that it's unfortunate that there's two stories in this movie of a slave wanting to rise up and assume power in Rome, and only the white one's journey is made to be the valid one, and the black one is like, no, that he's too evil, he's too ambitious to actually. It's like, well, aren't they kind of trying to do the same thing? It's unclear that Macrinus would necessarily be a bad ruler, I guess.
Macrinus
he doesn't want to be a ruler. He just wants to take down the government.
Right.
Well, he does want to be a ruler technically. So like, he is a really interesting historical figure. I think notably the first North African emperor of Rome. But didn't really do much with him other than letting, Denzel like be cool and have fun with the character. Yeah.
I don't know. I thought all of that stuff was beneath Denzel. Like he's chewing scenery, and that's all well and good. But like the character is lame. The sequences are lame. Like playing with the head on this pedestal was lame. It just all felt like such a movie. Yeah. I didn't buy any of it. I'm not going to let us get out of here without talking about the fact that they expect us to buy that they flooded the arena and put ships and sharks in there.
Jeff, they did do that, by the way.
Yeah, they did. They did flood the arena.
That was a thing that used to happen.
They put sharks in there.
No, sharks.
I don't know about sharks.
There were no sharks.
They did flood the Colosseum. It probably didn't look like that, but I remember because I went to one of my schools was part of like the Junior Classical League, and I spent a lot of time learning about Roman history, and like just the idea is like, how did they first of all, they built this thing, and then they got the water in there. And so the idea of seeing an actual battle on a flooded Coliseum is something I've always wanted to see. This movie at least does that. Maybe it's not as exciting as I want it to be, but
I thought that scene was.
It was a thing. It was a thing.
Yeah, it was.
No,
it was
sharks. The idea that they would put sharks in the water offended me. I was like,
I was more offended at the idea that that they give these people in the Gladiator arena crossbows.
Yeah,
it's like, dude,
bad idea.
It's dangerous for the audience.
It turned out to be a very bad idea.
Yeah, you're in the splash zone. You're in the splash zone. Anyway. I was reading Vulture's article about the realism of Gladiator 2. During the press tour for 2023's Napoleon, Ridley Scott made a number of pointed remarks against historians quibbling with perceived mistakes. Get a life, Scott said in the New Yorker profile. In a different interview with the Sunday Times, the director offered, when I have issues with a historian, I ask, excuse me, mate, were you there? No? Well, shut the fuck up then, end quote. So that's
because
what
Ridley Scott was there.
Intellectual titan Ridley Scott.
I think Ridley Scott's saying it doesn't matter. He's after the ecstatic truth, of the place.
Yeah.
But anyway, they did. According to this Roman historian, in this Vulture article, they did. There was a period when they could have flooded the arena. I think there were 10 to 20 years before they put the full basement in, when they could have flooded the floor and had exhibitions of marine mammals and that sort of thing. Animals. They could also sometimes use ponds or man-made pools outside the Colosseum for various nautical events. But yeah, to my recollection, the Romans never had sharks, end quote. So no sharks, but maybe like seals and shit, like that's a thing that they could have done. So, and just Jeff, you gotta admit, if they're able to achieve even a fraction of what was seen in the film, like in real life, that's like logistically just incredible to contemplate.
Yes, no, of course. I mean, I'm not coming down hard on the architectural prowess of the Romans. I'm coming down on this dumb movie.
Apparently, there were also rhinos in ancient Rome, but no record of anyone actually riding a rhino. I will say again. Rhino, it's like difficult. It's a cool concept. Let's have a rhino in there. That looks very silly, but like, hey, they're trying to do something new. They're trying stuff.
I like the idea of a guy riding a rhino, and they were aware of what rhinos were. That just seems difficult logistically to me, anyway.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on Gladiator 2?
I mean, what a time, right? For basically the Colosseum existed. The gladiatorial games existed for Roman leadership to distract the population from how they were fucking up the country the empire, basically. And how fitting is it today that we're looking at Gladiator 2 and we're like, every day is a new appointment. Every day is a new piece of stupidity. So I don't know. What's old is new again. Like we are just repeating history, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I do think the movie's politics are like fairly incoherent.
Yeah,
but it's trying to be like, hey, Rome was like America today, basically. Like believe in the dream of a democratic republic. But it's doing so in such a weak and not very specific way, very kind of vague way of. It's Paul Mescal's speech at the end of the movie about freedom and all this, and it's just all this vague platitudes that doesn't end up amounting to much. And that's a bummer, because I think Devindra, it does have the potential to be extremely socially relevant, this movie, and I don't think it takes that chance or takes that opportunity to do so.
I don't think it takes any chances at all. But also, like it's pretty much the same exact stance as the first movie. Like democracy may be good, maybe better than emperors, except this movie itself was like, no, democracy never stood a chance against like power hungry warlords, and we're gonna do it again. We're gonna take a shot and hopefully it all like works out at the end of this movie.
I'm gonna say one other thing I really did not like about this movie is that the scene when Lucius goes downstairs and sees the diorama they made out of Maximus's belongings. Like,
here's a museum we made just for Maximus.
I don't believe they would have done this. I don't. And then his Maximus's his stuff is right there front and center. It's not like I don't remember seeing like a full hall of like 50 guys of stuff. It's just like this one dude and maybe a few other things. And Maximus made such a big impression. They're like, we gotta mount his shit on the wall so we can all look at it forever. It's like, I don't think anyone cares. I don't think anyone would care in this situation, you know. Anyway, all right. Despite all that, at the end of the day, it is really impressive that Ridley Scott made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.